everyone can go to class, right? Everyone's going to have an English 101, no matter where you go, or a math 100, math 200. But it's the experience outside of the classroom that sets universities apart.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Defense Never Rests. I am your host, Trisha Baxter, and now I think I can say she's permanently a co-host with me back is Talar. Hey Talar, how are you?
Hey Trish, I'm good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me back.
I think I'm just making you a permanent co-host. Is that okay?
Hey, it works, you know? That would be one of the greatest things to come out of this pandemic.
I love it. I love you. So this will be awesome. All right. So today we are sitting down with two members of Kentucky State University's leadership, Doug Allen and Lisa Lang. Doug Allen is the VP of Finance and Administration, and Lisa Lang is the General Counsel. And they really have such a unique and fresh and hopeful response to 2020. And we are going to dive into it. So I'm super excited about this episode. So without further ado, let's bring Doug and Lisa on. Welcome, Doug and Lisa. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So let's get started. Let's give us a little background of what you guys do. You both work for Kentucky State University. The university world has certainly seen its challenges in 2020. But before we kind of get into that, give us a background. What do you do for the university, and how long have you been doing it? Let's start with you, Lisa.
Okay. I was just going to defer to my Vice President, Douglas R. Allen. But I would be happy to begin. I am the General Counsel for Kentucky State University. I've been here for over 3 years. We are starting our 4th year. My background has been in education. Over the last 12 years, I've worked in various roles relating to education that culminated into this position as General Counsel with Kentucky State University. I work very, very closely with our Executive Vice President, Douglas Allen, and I'm really happy to be able to do this podcast with him today because we have worked very, very closely, especially over COVID, to be able to continue services in a way that is both positive and in support of our students.
That's awesome. Doug, what about you? Give us your backstory.
All right, sure enough. Again, I'm Douglas Allen. I'm the Executive Vice President for Finance Administration and Chief Financial Officer for Kentucky State University. Been here now since May of 18. Prior to that, I spent many years in public accounting with the firm Crowe Horwath, and I specialize specifically in higher education, governmental, and not-for-profit entities. Interesting enough, Kentucky State University was one of my external audit clients. So a couple of years back, I guess in 2010, they recruited me to come here, so I started in 2010 to 2012 as the Director of Accounting. I left, went to the Community College Systems as the Assistant Director for Finance there. And then Dr. Brown sought me out back in 2017, and I made the decision to come back to Kentucky State as the Executive Vice President in May of 2018. So I'm glad to be here. And as Lisa said, we do work very closely together, and I think this is going to be a good podcast because even before COVID, things were pretty good. But now that COVID hit, it's really allowed us to step back together and just see how things can work better for the university.
Well, I love it. Well, let's step back in time a little bit. I mean, we're 7 or 8 months out from when life really changed for all of us. Can we go back to March of this year and tell us what you were feeling or how the university was reacting once the shutdowns started to hit, once things really started to change? Tell us what was going on in your head.
So I will start. Lisa, please chime in anytime you like. But May the 12th was the day that the President's Council and there was an emergency call. I think that was on a Saturday, I believe it was. I know that our students were in spring break. We were all spring break during that time. So we were under the unique position of how do we communicate that to the students? Do we bring them back? Do we not bring them back? So I remember very clearly the president said, we are now in a pandemic. And how is the university going to operate? There were a lot of unknowns that very first day, because this was something that no university or any other entity out there had ever faced. So I can just remember going through my head, and of course me from the finance side, I'm like, okay, how is this going to initially impact the university fiscally? What's it going to look like for our student count, et cetera? So again, that very first day, there were just a lot of unknowns. There were a lot of questions on the table. And I think our president did a great job since day one, really being able to guide us through this pandemic.
And to Douglas's point, I think that what people have to remember is this is something that none of us have ever been through. And, as much as people wanted information about what it is that our plans were moving forward, it was really, really hard because we had to get together, we had to come up with a plan, and then we had to message the plan. And so part of the struggles and the challenges with messaging the plan is that things were constantly changing. And so, what I tried to explain to people is it's not a matter of us being indecisive and not being able to make a decision. It's that we had to be flexible, we had to be nimble, and we had to be able to constantly be able to adjust to this changing world. And it felt like things were there were some days I felt like it was changing by the hour.
Just to give us context in terms of what you're dealing with, it's one thing when you're trying to maneuver a small canoe, but I don't think you guys are talking about maneuvering a canoe. You're talking about like a battleship, right? In terms of the population of your university. How many students do you have approximately?
So our full-time equivalent is normally around 2,200 students.
Wow.
Yes. And interesting enough, regardless of the size of the school, every school had to treat this pandemic with a very sensitive nature. Yeah, and I keep thinking about, again, that very first day that we had the discussions, and Lisa is exactly right. Things were really changing by the hour. We would put a plan in place, okay, just an initial plan. It could be literally 24 hours later, that plan has totally changed based on feedback maybe from our Board of Regents or say the governor's office, et cetera. So it's been a challenge, but again, I think we've navigated that battleship in the pond pretty well.
Yeah, and to your point, Talar, it really doesn't matter the number of students that we have, because regardless of the number of students that we have the same kind of infrastructure that a large university does. And so the issue in my mind was less about the number of students you have and more about the number of areas in which we had to address and to be able to respond in each area, and then to do it together. And that's part of the problem, is making sure that all of the different parts of the university is communicating well, and that we're communicating together in concert. And, we've had to have numerous calls where it's almost like you had to have a timeout, because what people forget is when you make decisions in your area, it's impacting other areas. And so we would have to slow down and say, wait a second, student affairs, what you're doing is impacting business operations, and business operations impacts academic affairs. And so we constantly had to come back together to have conversations to make sure that we were all on the same page. And one big challenge that we had from the onset is we had students who left all of their possessions on campus in their dorm rooms. And so we were unsure at first, are we talking 2 weeks? Are we talking 6 weeks? Do you have students come back on campus and get their things? And if they come back on campus, what's the protocol that we will use to bring them on campus and to get their things in a way to be safe? And so, we constantly had to stop and have conversations to make sure that we had all of the internal stakeholders at the table to talk about what that process needed to look like. It just took a lot of discussions to try and figure out how we were going to get our students their things. And, you had people who would say things like, I left medication, I left classes, I left my computer. And so we needed to have conversations about that because we ended up going online. We were 18% online prior to spring break. And within, I want to say 2 weeks, Doug, or maybe even less than that, we went 100% online.
Right. And within 3 days, we were 100% online. 3 days.
Yeah.
And I tell you, that's very interesting because, again, as Lisa stated, certain areas could impact others. For example, academics having to go from, like I said, 18% online to 100% online. Then we had to step back from our side of the house, finance, to look at the IT infrastructure, having to get additional bandwidth, additional computers, cameras, monitors, you name it. So there were so many things. And of course, those were unbudgeted items. I'm always thinking about the money side. Well, I think about the students first, money side second. But how that's going to impact so it doesn't interrupt the instruction for our students. We also had to look at, from an academic side, several of our instructors were not trained to provide online instruction. That's a totally different methodology of teaching versus being in class. So there was a huge gap there that I think we were able to close fairly quickly. Interesting enough, there really was not a right or wrong answer because this is new, right? There is no best practice out there, so we had to make what is going to be the best possible decision for the university, for our faculty, staff, and our students. But again, when you're working under pressure, this also allows you to see any holes that are in the operations as it stands, because we are really moving to a new normal, all right? I think the brick and mortar buildings, I think we're going to see less of in-class instruction, et cetera, based on this. And again, but we will be prepared to move forward as we need to.
And what strikes me about what all you guys said is that as you're going into May, there's no existing playbook to operate off of. There's no, well, let me see how person X did it, or university X did it, or this business did it. You're creating the playbook the moment that it's happening. And it's not like you have time to create it. It's not like I'll sit down and work on it every week. You got to make split decisions. And I think we're far enough out that we kind of have starting to forget all of that. Like, you guys had logistics that you really just had to figure out how to do things all over again. Did you just sit down and create yourself, or did you have any exterior resources? Did you pull, what did you pull on to help you make these decisions?
Honestly, we pulled on each other, to be very honest with you. We did receive input again from our Board of Regents, making sure that we addressed their concerns. I think one of the challenges during this period is looking at what our sister institutions were doing, and some of those outside influences saying, oh, we should be doing it the same way they're doing it. But then 3 days later, some of our sister institutions had to then retract some of the statements they made or things that they put out there. And thankfully, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but we have not had to retract any statements that we've put out there. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I think that's a testament of the work that the president and the council has performed during this time. And you were talking about too, as far as other external parties. Of course, being here in the state capitol, we're literally a mile and a half away from our legislators. There was also, I guess, a perception that we had to do things right because we were in the state capitol, right? So we were able to get guidance from the governor's office as well. And we actually kind of mirrored what the governor was putting out as he put out daily updates, COVID updates, as far as the mask requirements, the social distancing requirements, et cetera. We modeled that approach. And I think that helped bring a lot of ease and less the angst of a lot of individuals.
And to just kind of piggyback on what Douglas said, I think that Dr. Brown, our president, what he did was he kind of held back a little bit, and he waited to see what our sister institutions would do. And I think that is the beauty of why it is. I think that there were some people that thought we were slow in reacting, but it was intentional because we wanted you let somebody else be the guinea pig first. And so we had other people doing things, and then we were able to come in and navigate around some of the obstacles, one. But the other thing, too, I think is really interesting when you talk about our sister institutions. I think we have a good relationship with our sister institutions, and I think that is in part because the regional universities have different demographics that we serve and support. And so I don't really feel like there's a ton of competition sometimes, at least from my perspective with other general councils, because I think there is a place for us all to exist together. And I think that I was on calls with, and I think Douglas, you probably were with some of your counterparts at the other universities to share resources and talk about what they were doing and to share experiences so that we could all try and navigate these tough times and try and make it as easy as possible for our students and their parents.
So when the students are coming back, what is the decision? Do you go 100% virtual?
Oh, when you say, so right now it depends on when in time you're talking.
Let's go back to the first decision. So you had 17%, or I think you
18%.
said 18% as you were going into spring break, and then you guys were able to really nail it down a decision. And then when do you go virtual after that, or what's that look like?
So basically 3 days after the announcement, we were 100% online.
And did that stay that way through the summer? Did you guys have summer classes and you can?
We have what's called a pre-college academy, and those are some of the, they are potentially incoming freshmen to the university. So it was a pilot program. We had about 35 to 38 students on campus. So and they came in, at least I think that's around June time frame.
Right.
But before those students came on, again, there was a lot of planning and preparation to use that class of students as our pilot to see, okay, how would our food service work? How would it work for housing? How would it work for the social distancing, et cetera? And through that process, thankfully, no one had contracted COVID. We had a really good plan of action in place, and it worked very well. So going into the fall, we are still online. There were just a few hybrid classes that we have here on campus. We have about 1,000 students on campus and another 1,200 or so off campus. But with that being said, I think we will probably continue with the model that we currently have. I think there are some classes that you almost have to have in person. So I think our provost has identified those classes and moving forward. But for now, I think we will stay, that 90 to 95% online.
And I think what's important to understand too is that we are an HBCU, and part of and being an HBCU, it's about the experience of being on campus. So even though we have a large part of our classes that are online, our students are still on campus. And that was a very important important component for us because a lot of our students are first generation low income students, and they really need the supports that only an HBCU can provide. We wrap our students in supports. And so the thing with the Pre-College Academy is that they take part of the issue, I think, with our education system in general is that not all of our students are necessarily as prepared as they need to in their most basic classes prior to starting college in the fall. And so part of the problem sometimes with our students being able to complete college in 4 years has been in the past that they were arriving on campus without really everything that they needed to be able to equip them to be successful. And so the Pre-College Academy, they take their basic classes, I think it's math and English mostly, like 3 days a week, but 2 days a week, they get tutoring services and they get additional supports to help them get where they need to be so that they are prepared to start in the fall, and all of the classes that they take are going to be full credit classes. They're not going to be the pre-classes. And so we really wanted to see if we could come up with a model where we could work with our students on campus and online and keep them safe, because it is a real big part of who we are and why our students come to us.
I had the pleasure of chatting with Lisa. How long ago was that? A few months ago now. I don't know when it was. And it was such a great conversation, but I was embarrassed to admit that I did not know what an HBCU was. I would like to believe I'm not alone, and I'm not just the most ignorant person in the country. So for the sake of my fellow ignorant people in the country, would you mind explaining what that is?
So again, historically Black College and University.
Okay.
That's what it stands for. And again, the mission, interesting enough, let me say this, Kentucky State is about 50-50 in diversity, okay? So HBCU doesn't mean that it's all minority or African-American students that attend Kentucky State University. It truly is about a 50-50 mix, which I think we actually do have the best diversity in the Commonwealth from our other sister institutions. Again, it prides itself on helping those that are kind of more or less underserved, right? We truly have a passion, not that any other school does not, but I only can speak for Kentucky State at this time. And we have a passion to see our kids succeed. As Lisa stated, a lot of them are first-time college students. Several of them that graduate. Of course, they're going to be the first time first individual to graduate from their family. And I take that to heart. We actually take it to heart in making sure that we're able then to provide the resources that these students need. As Lisa said, a lot of times these students come from some pretty tough places. And being here at the university, I know they feel safe. I know they feel welcome. And we do anything that we can to make sure that their experience is positive and providing them the education needed to get to actually work in the real world. So those are just some of the things that we really pride ourselves on as a HBCU.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that explanation. Not for me, because I already knew all that, but for everybody else that needed to know. You know, I don't know if this is too personal for me to share, but I'm going to share it anyway because that's what I do. One of the things that struck me about my conversation with Lisa when we spoke is when she was explaining to me the reason that she does all this networking on LinkedIn. And she told me it was to help her students. And I'm going to get choked up because it really, really touched me. I don't think I've ever met anybody like that. And that just goes to show what, you know, and support what you were saying, Doug, that, you know, these aren't just words. You guys are true believers. You really do believe in your students. And, you know, what I learned from Lisa is it doesn't end it's not just at school. It doesn't end with graduation. It follows afterwards. They're going to need networking, resources, help that they're not necessarily going to have available from their family of origin. Are there any other ways that you support your students after they graduate?
I want to jump in really quick here, and it's not after graduation, because I want to talk about something that Douglas did and what we do at the university. And a lot of people don't think about this. We've got students who are attending our university who are in the foster care system.
Oh, wow.
When you think about it, so if the university decides that it's going to close in the middle of a pandemic, where are these students going to go? And most universities close down entirely their residence halls. We did not. We have at least one student I can think of, but we've got students who are in the foster care system who have elected to stay in the system until they're 21, or they are recently coming out of the system. And we provided a place for them to stay over the break. And we kept it open for them at an expense to the university, because when you think about it, if you've got a handful of students, but you're keeping an entire building open, but that's a decision that Douglas and the president and the council made, because that's what we do for our students.
And we had 9 students over the break, and actually we had 2 considered homeless students. And that's the thing. We are a community. We are here to serve. And that's why we're here, is because of students. Now, it's unfortunate what position they may be in, but it is our job to make their lives as comfortable and easy as possible here on our campus.
And that strikes me too, because I think there are other schools that have that they see learning as not just learning, that they offer support. They offer so much more than just education. And some of those schools, I know Philadelphia School District was a little bit slower to close, I think just by a couple days. But the press conferences were very much, look, a lot of these students, this is their safe place. This is where they get food. They intentionally delayed, and they got a lot of flack for that. Did you guys get any of that? And what was your students' reaction when you did decide to go virtual?
Well, when we went virtual in the spring, it was so new to everyone that it wasn't as major. As Lisa had mentioned earlier, there were times where kids had left some of their personal items, etc. So we had to work through those logistics. Spring wasn't too bad. Now, the fall, believe it or not, our students were ready to come back, and their parents were ready for them to leave the house.
I feel that, man. I feel it.
Yes.
There was way too much happiness to be back on campus.
And you would think, for example, when March hit, we really started looking at things. We were also going through our preparation for the FY21 budget cycle. So we had to look at all those things, anticipating a reduction in enrollment. That's just what we had to do. But interesting enough, our enrollment is actually up 4.2% over prior year. So I think that is indicative of the things that we do for our students. There are several programs that we offer here. For example, first-time, full-time freshmen that have a zero balance, we provide them a laptop, a university laptop, to assist them. Because again, a lot of these kids come, and I've seen it with my own eyes. For example, I've seen cars that barely make it on campus loaded down with their kids' belongings. And it just touches my heart. So I just have to, it's like, what can we do to make things better? And we have made a ton of sacrifices. But again, it's for the benefit of the university, for our students.
And I really do think that the community was in support. So to your question, Patricia, did we have any issues as it relates to, I don't remember anything, Douglas, I don't know if you do, of any pushback for any of the decisions that we've made. Our community has been very supportive of the university and all of the decisions that we have made for our students. So I didn't really see that as a real issue. And I think that we've been a partner with our community, and to the extent that we've ever had any issue with anybody who was overly enthusiastic about wanting to get together. We've worked with our local partners to make sure that we limited any kind of gathering either on campus or off campus to keep everybody safe, our students as well as the community. And so it has been a very good partnership, I think.
Let me add one thing. You had mentioned about services that we provide for our students. And during their time here at the university and once they leave, a couple things. Lisa and I, like I said, we work very closely together every day. And one of the things that we look at when we're thinking about our students and we're working with vendors, et cetera, and looking at contracts, we are very, very, very adamant about any contract that we enter into. It has to benefit our kids. It has to be some level of internships in there, scholarships back to the foundation to assist our current students and future students. And if they don't come to the table with the partnership mind, they will not sit at this table very long. I promise you that. So again, those are just the type of things that we're always thinking about the needs of our students.
Well, and let me follow up on that, because I think that's an interesting point, because I think, there's the mindset that you have a contract. It's the four corners of the contract, the letter of the law, and then you enforce it and follow it, and it's black and white. And I get the sense from you guys with the partnership model with your vendors and stuff that maybe you don't approach that. Talk about the contracts that came into question once COVID hit and things started shutting down, and what challenges they brought up, whether brought up by you or by your vendors, and how you work through that.
Well, what I was going to say is I just wanted to give a little context before Douglas came to the campus. So when Dr. Brown came 3 years ago, we were struggling in a lot of areas, and we had to, that there was a lot of upheaval and struggles when we first got on the campus, and our relationships were not the best with our vendors. And because Douglas came from the community college system, he had developed relationships with certain partners. And so Douglas was really, prior to COVID, instrumental in bringing new partners to the campus. They had either heard of some challenges that other companies had had in the past, or they themselves had been on our campus prior to his arrival and Dr. Brown's arrival, and did not have a good relationship, or it was not a good partnership. And so prior to COVID, Douglas and I had worked very, very hard to try and encourage people to invest in the university, to explain to them that we were partners and that we would work very, very hard to make it a good symbiotic relationship. So I think that's a really important place to start when you're talking about these relationships. So we had put a lot of time and effort to build these relationships. And so when COVID hit, COVID is going to negatively impact not just us, but our vendors. Because when you think about it, when you don't have students on campus, the way we had negotiated our contracts was that, we had opened up for the first time specialty restaurants in our student center. And part of the reason our vendor, Sodexo, had agreed to come on campus was because, they have to have the ability to make some money too. I mean, they're a business. And so if all of a sudden you have no students on campus, they don't have the ability to make money. Same thing with our bookstore. And so, we were very cognizant of the fact that we had partners who were taking a risk on us. And now they were in a place, not because of our making, but they were potentially back where they were before, not necessarily making a profit. So I'll turn it over to Doug at this point, but I think it's important for you to know that context with up to COVID.
And Lisa and I sat down with, for example, Sodexo, which is our largest vendor, followed our bookstore vendor. And then Rico basically being the third, and they're our mail and printing services provider as well. So I was actually able to sit down with each of those vendors and work out a plan of action looking at the current contracts that we were in and realizing, okay, operations are going to slow down. So what we decided was, instead of our vendors necessarily taking a hit, it was more like a deferred program that we entered into, to where there were some, for example, they were providing scholarship dollars on a monthly basis. We said, okay, you all can defer that to us. We'll pick that up on the back end, and then we'll extend your contract by the same amount of time that we're losing through the COVID process. And I don't think a lot of their other clients kind of taking that same path, so they really enjoyed working with us. But we have to realize, as Lisa said, they're in it to make money. We're looking at it for the best service for our students. So it was a win-win being able to defer back and forth certain elements of the contract and then being able to pick things back up, once COVID kind of starts to die down. So our general counsel made sure that the university was in the best position, period. So it's been great.
And the one thing I wanted to add too, when Douglas talks about, we do the best that we can do for our students, and part of ensuring that we're doing the best for our students is making sure we've got the people on our campus, whether they're employees or vendors, that also have the same attitude and mindset about our students. And it's funny because we've got our vendors, Sodexo, Follett, and Rico, that have their employees that are on our campus. And it's funny, it's almost like because they become vested in us and our students, it's almost hard to tell that they're not our employees. And when we were in our contract negotiations, we were very cognizant of the fact that Sodexo and Rico especially were going to have to let some of their employees go. And there were some employees that Douglas was like, when we were talking about employees, he was like, this person shall be back. I don't care whenever she gets her daycare issues resolved, we want her back in our copy center, because she displays the kind of attitude and commitment that we want for our students. We've not always had that from some of our vendors. And so when you have a vendor who has an employee who exhibits the same kind of passion that we do for our students, we're going to do what we can do to help try and make sure that those people are taken care of, and then that they're brought back and they can start working again.
And I love that, underpinning all of that, which is kind of the heart of the university, but underpinning all of that is an empathy. It's a team-minded spirit. And I've seen this some with my clients and how they treat their vendors. And I am a vendor to some people, so I appreciate it. That there's this idea that you're not going to follow the letter of the law or the contract, if you will. More important to you is a partnership, is in a relationship, and having empathy for people that work for you, that deliver you services. And that's beautiful, because I'm not sure that every business did that for COVID, right? So to see it, and I think that by doing that, you benefit your students. It's not a short-term play. You're very much looking at your operations and the people that you work with as a long-term play, and that long-term play will make you deliver better services to your students, make you a better university, and probably save you money in the long run anyway. But I love that. I just wanted to say that comment because I think it's beautiful.
Our students get very attached to certain individuals, and I think that is one of the things that when we brought Sodexo on board, Rico, Follett, Lisa and I were actually in the interview process to determine their employees, the vendors' employees, but they're like our family. So again, having that right fit is key and critical to our operations. But again, our students get attached to these people, and these people get attached to our students. So when you lose those people, you're losing. It's not just you losing a piece of the business relationship. Those are friendships that have been, managed and things over time as well. So it's having the right people on campus is absolutely key to our success.
And I don't know if I shared this story with Douglas, but what really struck me, and it's different now than what I've seen in years past, but I remember being, when we had our students who came in from, for our pre-college academy. At this point, we do have probably more people from Kentucky than we do have from out of state, but we do have some students that come from out of state. And I have heard in the past that when you come from Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Frankfort, Kentucky is a little different. It is an environment that they're not used to. And I've heard in the past that there have been some people that have not felt as comfortable or as at home in Frankfort. And I was so happy to hear. I ran into one of our students in the academic services building, and he was lost, and I was trying to help direct him. And it's so funny. I think young people in general, they don't necessarily recognize people, and they're just comfortable with everybody. And so I started talking to this student, and then he goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, my name is Lisa, and I'm the general counsel." And he just kind of looked at me, and I said, "You don't know what that is, do you?" And he was like, "Yeah, no." And so I said, "I'm the attorney." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And then I asked him where he was from, and he shared he was from Indianapolis. And then he said to me, and I said to him, "Ooh, this has got to be a big change for you. It must be a hard transition." And his response shocked me. What he said was, "I absolutely love it here." He said that, "I love the hometown feel here, and I am really happy here." That is the first time in 3 or 4 years that I have gotten that response from a student. And he genuinely seemed happy and glad to be on campus.
I can piggyback on that just for a second. The community prior to Dr. Brown's arrival, our president, there was a little unease based on where our students were coming from. But I tell you, our president is very methodical, and his goal was to change the culture, right, moving us forward, and also changing our student population. We have a record number of what we have, John Henry Jackson, which are our highest academic scholarships. We have more recipients this year, and that's been continuing to grow since our president came on board. And the better quality student you have, the better quality student you can produce in the workforce. And that's intentional, bringing the sound students in that need that extra hand, that extra opportunity here that the university can provide. And again, that's been key to our partnerships within the community. They see us as a pillar of this community. And Kentucky State, from an economic standpoint, really is one of the main engines, except for the state government, which is again located here in Frankfort. This is the second largest economic factor in Frankfort, Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think that from a legal perspective too, when Douglas talks about bringing in a different type of student, I think that in the past, part of the problem, it's not just about numbers. We need to make sure that the students that we bring to our campus are ready to access the education that we're here to provide. Because what I have seen in the past from a legal perspective is that it does not help us to bring somebody into our campus who is not ready to go to college, and they end up committing financial resources, because I deal with a lot of bankruptcy notices, a student debt from prior classes, because I don't think the person was necessarily ready to go to college. They may have been in college longer than they should have been because they were not ready, and then it doesn't put them in a good financial place. And so I like to think that we are getting less of those types of things in my office, because we're bringing in students that are more prepared, and we are working hard with our pre-college academy to help make sure that our students are ready and able to access the education to get through in 4 years, so we don't have to deal with some of the bankruptcy issues that we've had to deal with prior to Dr. Brown's arrival.
So for the students that need the extra support, I'm going to ask my question and I'm going to give a little explanation. I'm going to ask it again. For the students that need the extra support, how are you doing that? Are you finding that you can do it virtually, or do you need to be in person? And I ask that because I will say in my circle, I see a lot of parents struggling with kids that need extra support, whether it's special needs or they have educational challenges, and the virtual is really hard for them. How are you handling those kids that need the extra support?
There are a lot of resources that the university provides, and quite a few of those right now, just during this pandemic, are virtual in nature. However, we do have our students that are on campus. We do have health services. Our president intentionally beefed up counseling services, for example. So we have more counselors on campus. Health services, again, is very strong from that standpoint. So there are a lot of things that we're doing to make sure that not only from a financial perspective, but that emotional and mental health remains strong throughout this pandemic as well.
And prior to COVID, what the president has done is he's ensured that every student on campus, they have the ability to participate in different kinds of programs and help them support them through the process. And they have the ability, I think we have like 3 different programs that they can be involved in. And each program that they pick has staff members who are personally responsible for reaching out and talking with them either by phone, in person, by Zoom, to see how they're doing. And that's what we do between semesters too. We encourage, if we find out that somebody is not enrolled for the next semester, we've got people who are assigned to every single student on our campus to make sure we understand what the obstacles they are having, and we need to find out what it is that we can do to remove those obstacles. And if it means providing more in-person support, then so be it. We'll figure out what we need to do, or is it some virtual obstacle? And the other issue I think that we've had too is that by allowing students, for instance, to stay at home and be able to participate, we've got students who've got family members who may be sick and cannot work. And so they're at home helping to take care of family members, or maybe they're working locally. So, support takes all different forms. And in order to provide that support, you have to have the personal relationship with your students, and everybody has somebody that they can work with to make sure that their individual needs are being met. And I've actually been in meetings with Douglas where somebody has called, I think of when we were in auxiliary services, Douglas, and we were talking about trying to arrange roommates, and Gail was trying to talk to a parent who was frustrated. And then you got on the phone and you talked with that parent, because that parent wanted to make sure that her student was paired with another student who lived locally, because she felt like her son needed that support with that other person. And so Douglas got on the phone with her because, our person in auxiliaries was trying to say, that's not our policy, we've got him assigned somewhere else. And Douglas was like, oh God. And he just got up from the table and went and got on the phone, and then was giving the woman his phone number and saying, okay, here's what let me check into this. Here's what I'm gonna do for you. And if you have any problems, call me directly. So it's that personal support, Tricia, that we give our students. It's not just academic. Sometimes it's financial. I've heard Douglas get on the phone with a parent that's having trouble filling out a FAFSA.
And let's pivot to the future. You guys have the unique position of having spent the past 8 months on the front line of planning and creating a new normal. So I think you have a unique perspective to say, what do you find has been the positives from COVID? Where do you see education heading? Do you ever see it going back to what it was? I know there's like 5 questions in there, but that's the idea that I wanted to get to, is you guys now have can you look in your crystal ball? Can you give us an idea of what you think it's going to look like?
Again, I believe we're in our new normal. I don't think we'll ever fully go back to the way education was prior to COVID-19. I just do not see that. I think the nation and the world is on a different playing field now. I really do. So will we continue with the online instruction? Yes. And of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but based on the way things are right now, I see that for the foreseeable future, that we will continue to provide the online instruction. I think our students are getting, acclimated to that, especially where they were born in technology era. So it's kind of an easier transition. But I think too, allowing ourselves to have different programs for the kids to keep them engaged outside of classrooms. Our president said, and I won't forget this, students come to college for everyone can go to class, right? Everyone's going to have an English 101, no matter where you go, or a math 100, math 200. But it's the experience outside of the classroom that sets universities apart. So it's even a greater challenge right now, providing those additional activities for our students to engage with one another, also to engage with other faculty and staff members. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at being able to provide those additional fun activities, and also making sure that we keep everyone safe.
So I know I need to start to wrap this up, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question. In the middle of COVID, we are dealing with another national, and I don't know, pandemic, I don't know what the word for it, but George Floyd was murdered. Breonna Taylor, you have a series of deaths that really rocked our country. What was the reaction from the students when George Floyd was murdered? And how has the university maneuvered this time?
I would like to add, we never like to see those type of things happen in our nation. Our president handled it very well on behalf of the university. And I will say that our students are maturing. So the reaction was, it's okay to grieve, but they were very positive. They saw it as an opportunity to change our country. Any of us could have easily went out and vandalized buildings or tried to intentionally hurt someone else physically. But our position is these are opportunities to grow as individuals and grow as a country. We hate it, absolutely hate those things, and not just the act, but the outcomes after those. There is a level of hurt, and it's okay to hurt. There's a level of pain, there's a level of anger, but it's how you manage those things that gets us through these challenging times. And that's the uniqueness here of Kentucky State University. A lot of our kids have seen or experienced those very same actions from where they come from. So that's why we want to make sure that when they're here, that they are provided the necessary opportunities, the skill sets, the friendships, the networking to help make a difference. As we continue to work together as a nation, I think these things will eventually die down. Will they ever go away? Probably not, okay? But it's how we manage those things. And our students did a wonderful job at managing their emotions. Again, we had additional counselors on staff that the president brought on board to assist our students. And not only students, but faculty and staff members as well, as we all grieve through these type of processes. So again, our students did a phenomenal job of handling themselves and representing the university.
And just to add to what Douglas said, I think the reason why they handled it the way that they handled it was because the university response was what it was. And we were fortunate enough, our Attorney General, his office gave us heads up, I would say about 30 minutes to an hour prior to the announcement of the indictment with in the Breonna Taylor, with the issue there. And it gave us the opportunity to have one of our professors in criminal justice, who was also a former state trooper. He listened to the press conference, and he was able to kind of digest what that had happened and what was going to happen. And the president scheduled a Zoom meeting with the students on campus, and he had everybody from council participate in that Zoom meeting. And in that Zoom meeting, we started with that professor explaining to the students what it is that had just happened and being available for questions. And then he made sure that students were aware that, as Douglas said, that we had counseling available to anybody who felt a need to talk to somebody one-on-one. But then he turned it over to Kirk Miller, who is our student regent and SGA president. And he and Miss Kentucky were able to express what their feelings were. And Dr. Brown allowed them the opportunity to talk through what they felt they needed to be able to not only to grieve or to express frustration, pain, sadness, but also what is it that they wanted to do in order to be able to feel like they were making a difference. Because the challenge we have is that it's COVID. And, you know, what you want to be careful of is, as much as our students may have wanted to run down to Louisville, which is 30 miles away, to be able to demonstrate and stand shoulder to shoulder with other people, the problem is they're putting themselves at risk, and they're putting their friends at risk by leaving our campus, because we still got to deal with COVID. And so I think that what the president did was he gave them the ability to talk through how they were feeling and what they wanted to do in response to those feelings. And so they could do it in a way that was constructive, but safe.
Do you find that because you have a very diverse student population, that you have more tolerance and empathy between others, different people, races, genders, however you may define a minority? Do you find that you have more empathy now, or do you still see racism and sexism, homophobia on your campus?
Interesting enough, we don't really see a lot of that on this campus. It's a very diverse campus, not just only in your ethnic background, but again, I don't see any sense of homophobia on this campus. I really don't. And that's really the beauty of this this class of students, or this age of population, that they're more open and susceptible to believing in people for who they are, what they believe in. They're not quick to pass judgment on one another. Now, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it would have been a different story. But people are more open to allowing people to be who they are. Whoever you choose to be, you should be able to be that person and be comfortable in your skin, no matter what or how you choose to live your life, period.
And one thing I would say too about being on our campus as opposed to working or being someplace else is I do think that there is a higher degree of openness. So it's not that people don't disagree or maybe sometimes say something that may be considered a microaggression, but we talk about it. It's not hidden. And, you know, and I think what's so important is to have that ability to have that conversation, because a lot of times when people say the things they say, they don't mean it the way that maybe somebody else may take it. And you're not going to know that and be a better person unless somebody feels comfortable enough to say to that person, you know, I know that's not what you meant, but here's how it made me feel. And so I do really see a lot more openness on our campus than other places that I've been to have that dialogue. And I think that that is important. And it's a lot easier to have that empathy if you start putting yourself in somebody else's shoe and understanding why something you say may make someone else feel that way.
Well, I love that. We need to wrap up, but I just want to say, I think the podcast for me was an example of empathy leading crisis, right? We all are going to face crisis in our personal lives, professional lives. If you're running a business, university, you name it, it's how we respond to it. I'm so impressed with you guys, how you responded to it. Not to say you probably didn't have your own hiccups. And like Douglas mentioned, there was some hot tempers at points, but it's the fact that you work through it and you're better for it in the end, and you deliver a better experience for your students. And what a great example. So I just wanted to say that. I also really want to say thanks for joining me. I want to give you guys last words, and in those last words, if there's anything you want to wrap up and say, and also where, if people want to know more about you, where they can find you.
I think I appreciate the opportunity to have been able to share with you all what we do. I think especially when you're in operations, a lot of the work that we do is behind the scenes. So I do appreciate having the opportunity to be able to share, to pull back the curtain on what we do. Because I think that when you think of a college university, you think of, those people in student affairs and in academic affairs, because they're on the front lines, they're engaging with students. But I appreciate the opportunity to share with you what it is Douglas and I do, and how we support academic affairs and student affairs and supporting our students. So thank you for that. And I am very active on LinkedIn, and I have hashtag, lawyer Lisa Lang. And and if you want to reach me, I can be reached at lisaklang@yahoo.com.
So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on this podcast today. And it really allows us to see how we're operating as a university, and also being able to share that with others that will listen to this podcast as well. Really love what I do. I love being here. When you can actually get up every morning and be glad to go to work, that's a career, that's passion. So we thank you for that. I would just like to say too, on behalf of our president, M. Christopher Brown II, as he continues to move us onward, upward, and forward, we will continue. I hope that you all will keep up with Kentucky State University. I'm not a major player out there on the social media world. I will show my age. I'm not a Facebook person. I'm on LinkedIn.
He's a lurker.
Oh, he's a lurker.
I wouldn't call it a lurker, but I would respond to things out there every now and then. But I can be reached again at douglas.allen@kysu.edu. Again, it's a pleasure. We practice what we preach. We truly believe in the university, the position that we're in, and we're going to continue to serve our students and the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Well, thank you both. Loved it. Thank you both. I really appreciate it. And thank you everybody for listening. If you have not yet hit that subscribe button, give us a like, a review, 5 stars, wherever you're listening. We really appreciate the support, and make sure you join us next time on The Defense Never Rests. We will see you then.